When we look at the role of animals, they can play a role in everyday life. And when we think about how it plays a role for wellness especially, we look at the different aspects of both companion animals, our livestock, and then wildlife. So probably the most common thing people would think of when we look at how it would improve the lives for everyone is the physical improvement in health. And so when people have dogs, for example, they always encourage you to get up, take them for walks. They depend on you. And keeping the animals healthy often makes us think about how we can be a little bit more healthy, especially when it's the physical aspect. I think one of the most important ways that I would really like healthcare providers to think about how animals help people is in mental health aspects. Animals have been shown to reduce stress. Maybe not when they're puppies. I'll say they can provide a little more stress then, just like kids. But we know that having an animal can reduce some of that stress in your life. And part of that is because they provide companionship, but also they sometimes provide more of a purpose. So getting up and having that responsibility and someone that depends on you. And even more than that, I think when we look at companion animals, I will say especially dogs, cats maybe not as much, but dogs, they really live in the moment. And that's something that we're always striving for as individuals, is really to be present, that mindfulness. And animals have this unique ability to enjoy what's going on or feel sad in the moment, but then they don't worry about the future or the past quite as much. And I think that really is a good inspiration for people to live in the moment. I always say animals can be the social catalyst. And the reason I like to think of it that way is if you've ever been out on a walk or even in the airport, I laugh when I see people with their little animal carriers, and the first thing you want to do is like, hey, what's in there? Or is that your pet? Can I pet them? And research has shown that animals become this catalyst for social interaction, where people feel more engaged and more relaxed and see situations as more positive. And to me, that's something really special. We know that people that live with animals definitely can have some health benefits, and that's been shown in multiple studies, and actually some new and upcoming studies as well. So one being the physical aspect, and obviously decreasing your heart rate, decreasing blood pressure, but there's been more interesting things as far as even changes in hormones. So we know that some animals, especially petting an animal, can decrease your cortisol, which is a stress hormone. When we get anxious, we have more cortisol. But even more than that, there's been a couple of interesting studies coming out looking at oxytocin, which is that hormone that, a mother and a child or a parent and a child, it's a bonding type hormone. And there was actually a recent study that came out that I found fascinating this year that showed that if you stare into the eyes, you have mutual gaze between you and your pet, they have seen this increase in oxytocin like over 130% in dogs and actually over 300% in people. So again, it goes to that idea of feeling connection and feeling that you have a connection and you don't feel as lonely either. Loneliness is a big deal. And when you have an animal that lives with you, and it doesn't matter what type of animal, it can be a dog, cat, like I said, bird, fish, rabbit, but something that is there to listen to you and to have you feel like someone wants you to come home. And having that being really improves the way that you feel, and that aspect also helps you physically as well. We've also seen that children that have pets can actually take more responsibility not only for their pet, but for themselves, especially if they have illness There was a study done looking at kids with diabetes, and they found they were much more apt to actually take better care of themselves when they had a pet at the same time, because you have that support system. In other aspects of some interesting things is looking at microbiome. There's been a lot of studies, not only microbiome or the bacteria that may be healthy for us, but also in looking at different types of allergies. And they've seen that people that have pets often, I have to say, always be careful when I say, let your pet lick you. But I do, because there is that interaction. But we know that you can sometimes share microbiome for better or for worse. But they've also seen that kids actually are somewhat healthier, and kids that have had pets especially often have less allergies, which I find really interesting. My practice in veterinary medicine has changed as far as learning more what we're doing in human practice by looking at those animals as part of the family. And we know that's a fact because not only as a veterinarian, but in some of the surveys they've done, people that are pet owners now, about over 96% of them regard their pet as family. And with that in mind, I have to think of that animal as, how do I not only address a problem or an issue that they're bringing to me, but how do I help them be happy and healthy throughout the rest of their life? And how does that involve the rest of their family? And so we, look at, okay, if there's an issue, we can address that, but look at them as a whole. So having more of this holistic approach of saying, okay, if you have an injury, we may give you medication, but at the same time, you need to start moving more. We need to make sure that you overall mentally have stimulation. So for dogs, for example, that someone may bring me their dog and we'll say, okay, we're going to do not only this medication to help with their pain control, but we also need to get them in physical therapy. And for some owners, they think, oh, wow, you can do that for an animal. Yeah, we can, because again, it's this whole picture. Movement is life. We have to make sure we're moving in the correct way. But also, then we start bringing in the rest of the family in their care. And that might be, well, they may need to walk more to get a little bit more endurance. And so guess what? That means the owners have to walk more. So I think one of the most important things when we're looking at teaching the next generation of doctors is thinking about, do they have a pet? What interactions do they have with animals? So not every person needs a pet, but do they have something that they're interacting with, whether it's a friend's animal or just getting out in nature and appreciating animals? Because even though we think we're not animal people sometimes, most people have some type of interaction. And I think it's really important for students to think about that and ask, patients about what the role of animals is in their life. And think about how it might improve if they don't have those interactions, how they could get them. Whether, again, that's taking a walk and enjoying the scenery, or taking a hike, or just going to a zoo, or going to a shelter to volunteer. And I think that really is something that hasn't been appreciated and should be incorporated into education for the next generation.